Hi again. William Schnell, Chapter 3 of 30 Years of Watchtower Slave. Chapter 3 is entitled Entering Watchtower Slavery. And his first subhead is Individuality Submerged. From 1925 on, the Bible students were confronted with a real problem, which resulted from the newly emerged Watchtower policy. The issue was really this: shall we continue to develop our Christian individuality and buy out our time between birth and death as a new creation? Or shall we give in to the Watchtower concept, buy out our time between birth and death by selling books and collecting money, therefore, and turning it over to the Watchtower, along with a report of our time spent in this work every month? As time wore on, those placing the largest number of books, spending the most hours each month in the selling campaign, and turning over the most money were the favored ones, and those who continued buying out or redeeming their time and bringing forth fruits of the Spirit were increasingly belittled and were gradually pushed out and finally marked as evil servants. Thus, Bible students were forced to pay a high price to get the Watchtower campaign of 1922 started. You can imagine then what stresses and strains such new concepts were having on individual Bible students. In those early years, they were still accustomed to doing what was right in their own eyes, worshiping God after the dictates of their own conscience, and were to an extent willing to forward any good cause. It was very difficult for them to get the proper view of the matter when confronted with demands for such a drastic change by the very agency to which Bible students looked for scriptural guidance, namely the Watchtower Society. In various ecclesias of Bible students, there was only a slow recognition of the meaning of these trends. Believing in their hearts that every man must decide such matters for himself, as guided in his study of Scriptures by the Holy Spirit, such groups failed to sense the danger facing them in the dynamics of the situation as provoked and sustained continuously from Brooklyn by the Watchtower Society. Next subhead is Entering Slavery. During these times, the Society was also undergoing a far-reaching organization process. Offices and printeries were expanded, and the mechanics of the big advertising campaign were being developed. Orders for books and booklets and pamphlets were beginning to pour in. In Germany, at that time, it became necessary to move the Society's offices from Barmen in the west to Magdeburg in central Germany, where large properties were purchased with American dollars from monies already received through the book-selling campaign in America. It was during that time that the director of the German branch began recruiting help in Bethel at Magdeburg. On August 18, 1924, I entered Bethel, headquarters of the German branch of the Watchtower Society. Little did I realize at that time that I was entering into slavery, so profound that I would not be able to emerge free again as a Christian until 30 years had elapsed, and I had spent the greater part of my life. Little did I realize on that day when I walked into the offices of the Watchtower Society in Magdeburg that I was leaving Christian individuality behind and entering into a sort of zombie existence, half individual and half mass. I then and there became a cog in the machinery of one of the great subversions of the age, the like of which had only once before been envisaged, and that in the first great apostasy led by Cush, Nimrod, and Semiramis, under the insignia of the Watchtower of Babel. Like most Bible students in those days, I had always been largely concerned with making sure of my calling and election as a person, and with fellowshipping with my brethren in Berlin or in our local ecclesias. I was but vaguely aware and only loosely concerned with the doings at the headquarters of the Watchtower Society in Brooklyn, or in Magdeburg for that matter. Like most Bible students, I still took for granted the Society's status as set by itself when it was still young and humble, namely that it was the beast of burden for the brethren. As such, it provided us with helps, Bibles, and with the magazine, The Watchtower, which it published. We saw no reason why an organization should not do such chores for us, and since they themselves told us they were our beast of burden, none of us ever suspected that they would forget their place and suddenly emerge as a beast to regiment Christian individuals and tell us what to do and not to do In allowing the society to lull us to sleep in this manner, most of us were outwitted by the self-styled beast of burden, which today has turned on those whom it formerly served and has reduced them to the position of slaves. Now, I got to admit that when I first read this over 50 years ago, I was shocked but not convinced by what seems to be over-the-top analogies he's using. But no, I learned the bitter way, just as Schnell himself did, that this is indeed true. What started out as a loose confederation and fellowship of Bible students became a slave ship. The ark that you have to get aboard if you're going to be saved at all. So one can't help but think, as one reads this comparison of the beast of burden with George Orwell's a famous analogy in Animal Farm. Vivian has made a video about that, by the way. Animal Farm and Watchtower history. So I'll link that for you. Next time, a marked contrast